hybrid. So there are two authentication mechanism we can use it. Now, what is the difference? Your Active Directory that we already covered, so I'm going to bypass this. That how actually this is talking about more towards your hybrid environment. You will be having, you know, when you're integrating your on-prem database with your Azure database. So of course, your on-prem database, you will be having Windows integrated credentials. In that case, the authentication mode which is being used, that is called anti-LM and Kerberos. That's not the case in case of you if you're using the Azure AD. In Azure AD, you will be having OpenID, SAML, and other stuff. So why do we use Azure AD credentials, and why we still need to use the Active Directory? Because if this is your on-prem, so this is more towards your on-prem server, or you're having on-prem SQL, right? This is your on-prem SQL server. Now here on this, you will be having Azure Active Directory. This is on my Azure cloud. This is on cloud. Okay. So on this two, between these two, if you wanted to have a connectivity sort of thing, so of course, first of all, what you have to do, say, let's understand you have one database here, one SQL database here, and which is running on on-prem. This is your SQL 1. SQL 1. Now there is another SQL or the database which is on your Azure Drive, Azure Active Directory, SQL 2. Now you want to connect between these two. So what all the parameter, what we can do? Any input, guys? What all, how, or what all the various options that we can set up in order to make the connectivity? Guys, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are audible. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so just think and let me know. I just want because it's your favorite topic, guys. You have to use this. Just think, because
So you,
connectivity and all the component we already discussed. So I want at least when you jog your brain, you should be able to use all the concept and try to correlate here. Take your time. I'm here. Did you get
you
my
just
question?
connect.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah. So this is your on-prem SQL database, right? SQL 1. And this is your another database which is running on cloud. How do you make a connectivity between these two?
Connectivity.
Okay, another 30 seconds.
We can RDP, right? Just from here to here, like,
Sorry, Nikita, I have not seen you. It was a little late.
Actually, we can't hear you.
Hi. Am I audible now, Sudha?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
The first option in my mind is RDP, right? So like, if you have IP address for this, then you can connect from one SQL, like, from the prime, on-prem versus like, cloud.
But I didn't say that server, right? The server could be on your it could be on your on-prem, and it could be
Oh,
on
yes.
your cloud.
Microsoft, like, what do you call, Management Studio.
Hmm.
You log in Microsoft Management Studio, and then you have IP address or just like server name. You can
Yeah.
log in server name.
So that could be
Then,
one of the connectivity. So that we
mhm,
discussed yesterday. Say if
mhm.
this is the case.
Or that's a connection string you can use and login.
Correct. So here you have to come connection string, but for connection string also you cannot log in. See, if this is my database which is running on cloud, and if I want to connect, even though I have a permission, I'll not be able to connect unless I go and change the firewall, right? That's what we understood yesterday. We need to specifically add our IP
Oh,
address.
yes, IP address. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's,
So once
yeah.
you add, then only you will be able to connect, because this is a kind of network layer of security, right? So that way you can, first you need to add your public IP if you're accessing from your local PC or your on-prem. And if you do not have, then what? So you do not want to connect, or you do not have the public IP. So what are the various options we have it? How do I connect my database? Because public IP normally in real time scenario, no one will prefer, and no network or no company will give a public IP so soon, so easily.
The best in service is like, the one option probably. That's also server level.
Yeah, to some level, yes, but the best way is to have a VPN when you have this virtual site to site connectivity or site to point connectivity. Say your SQL database is running here. So I do not want public IP, or my IP is not exposed over the internet, but I still want to connect it. So what is the best way is through the VNet virtual network, that we can have the restrictions. I mean, we can restrict virtual IP addresses or VNet specific to your database services. That we'll discuss a little later in this module only. So I'm just keeping it park a little bit, and we'll just come again and we'll discuss it, what is and how we can do it. So now we are talking about authentication again. So now here, if you talk about and understand the authentication part, you cannot see here IAM, right? So that also gives you, let me open, yeah, here, virtual machine here. So this is my example of IaaS, infrastructure as a service, where I have used the SQL Server, and I'm the owner of operating system as well as the application which is running and hosting or on that server. So I'm the complete owner. So I have a full access here. Now I can use the SQL Server configuration and all the best in services, the backup, disaster recovery, everything. But if the moment you switch to platform as a service, so here you cannot see anything like the backup restoration, because these all are being managed by Microsoft, and Azure team will take care everything on behalf of you. Okay, so now this is your AD and Azure Active Directory difference. I'm just skipping for now because we already understood in depth when we were talking about identity management. Authorization process and authentication process we also got to know, but just to revise it, what is authentication and what is authorization and what all identities in real-time example. Say if there are three terms that we have to understand. The one is identities, authentication, and authorization. Okay, so what all identities could be? Identities could be any object in your Azure or in your subscription which has some numbers. I mean in the back end you will be having some number for each logical identities. So the identities could be your username, identities could be your service principal name, identities could be your groups, identities could be your computers. So these are the identities. Now again there are different set of identities. The one is on a cloud which we create. Say if you're creating any user on cloud, so we'll be having identities that is called cloud identities. When you are syncing your identities, say users, groups, computer, from your local or your on-prem environment to your cloud, those identities are known as hybrid identities. And for every identities there is a object ID associated with it. Now how actually it look like? If you I'll take you to this portal and see here under this Azure AD. So users, groups. So this object ID for all of the object or all of the identities, we will be having this object ID like this, and this will be unique across your tenant and your subscriptions. So this object and these are the different identities. Now these identities is known as cloud identities because we have not synced any of identities from cloud, from your on-prem to cloud. So here the directory sync is the mechanism which actually sync all of your identities from on-prem to cloud. So here you can see directory sync is no, it means these are cloud identities. Okay, so going back to the same diagram, identities could be users, groups, computers, or SPN, service principal name. Now what is authentication and what is authorization, that also we discussed. So let me quickly reiterate. So what is authentication? Authentication is some sort of you know uh, you have to define that who you are and whether you are in fact you are just proving your identity and justifying that okay, you are actually a part of this tenant in this case, or you're part of this organization. So that authentication you are proving or establishing that. So in case authentication is something that okay, if you have some identities created in Azure, then those you are quite part of my organization and part of my tenant. Now, authorization is something that once the company or once the organization or once the tenant or subscription has the identities followed by authentication, then once you meet this criteria, then I should be authorizing you that what sort of permission privileges I can give it to you, or this person can have this much permission or this much authorization. This authorization could be related to the different department or could be related to different resources. Okay, so these are the three concepts that we need to understand it. And let's see in portal what is that. It says authorization is a process that occurs after user is authenticated and grant them a specific access to resources. Authentication is a process of proving a user or service that who they say they are. Okay, now if I say here, and why we are trying to understand this concept, because these are these concepts are relevant to access, authorization and authentication. And when we in real-time environment, when we grant the permission, so we should be knowing, okay, what all the identities, why we need the authentication, and why, what kind of permission that we want to grant. So now take the classic example. Okay, someone in your company join as a DBA, junior DBA, right? So the junior DBA, the first thing first is HR create their employee ID, right? The first name, last name, and with the help of local IT team, they will that person will get email address and the necessary permission, whatever it is, right? So identities is being done most of the time. It will be done by your HR. HR will first create the identities in their HR system, and then from there, the identities will sync to your on cloud or on prem. Again, you can just play around with your identities as per the requirement. Now, authentication is something that, okay, your username and password, the moment you get your username and password, you are being authenticated to certain, you are meeting the minimum criteria. Now, authorization is something that, okay, once you establish that, okay, who you are, then the HR team requested, okay, this person is having DB, or this person is belonging to database team, then all the database related activities you will slowly or gradually, depending on what is his designation, you will slowly delegate those permissions. So that is your authorization. So here, what all the Azure Active Directory authentication on-prem, as we already seen that, okay, the on-prem Active Directory can be synced to Azure Active Directory. And if you recall, there is a tool called Directory Sync, and now the latest version is Azure AD Connector. With the help of Azure AD Connector, we can sync our on-prem identities to the cloud. Okay, then multi-factor authentication is fully supported. What is multi-factor authentication, guys? Anyone, please?
Two different kinds of authentications. For example, password and then maybe security questions or something like that.
Yeah. So yes, correct, Drona. So the multi-factor authentication is the same thing, something you know and something you have it and something you possess, right? So like you know the username passcode, so that is one way of authenticating. The now when you combine it with your some extra code or something, and then it will force you to do two-factor authentication, or multi-factor authentication. Say you know the username and passcode. Along with that, you have to supply some OTP. The OTP could be in the form of SMS, or it could be in the form of your security code, which you use it in your Microsoft Authenticator app, or you might receive some sort of voice call over your registered phone number. So these kind of multi-factor authentication is also possible by using Azure Azure Active Directory authentication. So these are the different authentication mechanism that you can definitely would like to incorporate in your SQL database. Now configure Active Directory for your Azure SQL database. Now that we already seen it, that to some extent you can do it, but not on this pass, but you can definitely configure it for your virtual machine. Now if I just logged in, or probably I must have logged in here. This is my database. So we are yet discussing all the authentication, authorization till your operating system level. So of course you will be having a set of security here on the database level also, and here you will be having all the server roles. I think you guys must be knowing it. So by default you will be having bulk admin, DB creator, disk admin, process, security admin, server admins. So we can create any new role, and we can start giving a role to anyone, like okay, who will be the owner. And if you integrated your the DB server with your Azure AD, then you can fetch. So this is what it says. Now if I select all this and type the name, so if you already integrated with your Azure AD, then you can easily connect, and all the identities will be from your Azure AD. Now let me try whether it is taking or not. No, because it's not connected. So from here also, once you through with your operating system level permission, then again you can define the roles, the security, and depending on the access privileges, depending on the role of that particular users, you can give the necessary permission or privileges from here. Again we'll come back here little later and we'll see what all these on the high level, and we'll try to create a couple of test account. Now moving to the schema, how do we perform what all the secure scope we have it in SQL. So on this server, database, and schema, as you know, right, sorry, schema is a collection of objects which allow objects to be grouped into a separate namespace. And how do we ensure that schema and the database is fully secure? Till now we were discussing about identities. Now we are going to discuss database security, right? So identities is a kind of boundary on the high level. Now on the database level, what all the security parameters we have it? How do we ensure that only right person can have a access on my database? That all we are going to discuss now. So this is something like, okay, once you create the master database, then you will be having permissions. Now let me show you the built-in database role. So we have these many fixed roles. Now here you can see, and I'm sure that some or other way you must have seen all of these roles. We have a sysadmin. Member of this sysadmin role can perform any activity on the server, right? Now when I say the any activity, they might perform any sort of database related stuff. They might create the database, they can delete the records and all. Now when you similarly the member of server admin, what they can do, they can change the server wide configuration. For example, memory, shut down the server, the CPU utilization, and then anything pertaining to compute. The bulk admin, member of this bulk admin role, can perform any insert SQL statement. They can, bulkly, or they can customize your SQL query, or they can use the PowerShell script or something to perform the bulk operation. Okay. DB creator, I think again, you must have assigned to someone, or you must have used some in or some or other form. Member of this can have ability to create, restore, alter, and drop any database. And similarly, we have a different set of roles here: disk admin, process admin, security admins. So they have the fixed role. Okay, once you cross the boundary of your identity, these are the different set of existing roles. You can combine the identities plus database permission to achieve the overall security of your database. Okay, now if I just come to database level, what all we have it. So server role, let me cancel it. Sysadmin, say I want to grant someone new. Right now I don't have any user. Okay, so by default I have these many people who are part of my sysadmin. If I want to add, so let me check if I can. No, it's not integrated. So it's like only these users who are part of my SQL right now, they should be able to access it. Once you integrate your Azure AD with your database, then you should be able to browse it and say, right now what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to match this user Mike Peterson, but I'm not able to do because I've not set up any sort of um, integration as such. So that is the reason I'm not able to see. But if you set up integration, then you should be able to select the identities from here and should be able to do it from any of your object, or any of from SQL DB, or from PowerShell, or from your bulk permission that you can do it. So here I think uh, these are the members who are part of sysadmin, and they can perform a lot of uh, database related stuff, and they can some or other way they will be having full access here. Now if you talk about setup admin, server admin, security admin, so we already seen their functionalities. Right now no, but if you want you can again add it. You can also do this through your query, and there's no action. It's okay. Okay, there's no script as such. So these are the different set of built-in roles where you can collaborate your existing database role along with your identities solution in place. Now moving to the database role in SQL Server and Azure SQL. So how you're going to integrate your database for the built-in SQL, and if you have something on Azure SQL. So in a SQL and managed instance, the role can be differ, and you can define. Basically it's just how you're going to say. We always say that okay, you can always go and